He looked at me with those whiskey-soaked, bloodshot eyes and muttered, "Today, you're gonna earn your keep for real." And just like that, in the back of a grimy bar off Woodward Avenue in downtown Detroit, my childhood ended. Hey there, friends. I'm Grandma Annie, 72 years old and still kicking. Today I'm finally sharing the story I've carried like a heavy stone in my heart for most of my life. It's not a story I tell lightly, but my grandkids keep telling me, "Grandma, your story could help someone. It could save someone." So here I am, tea in hand, in my cozy home in Lakewood, Denver, with the Rockies glowing pink out my window. Before I dive in, do me a favor. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. Are you in New York, Arizona, maybe a little town I've never heard of? And if this story speaks to you, give it a thumbs up and subscribe. It keeps this grandma going. Now, let's go back to the beginning. I was born in 1953 in a version of Detroit that doesn't exist anymore. The Detroit River was clean enough to dip your feet in. Streetcars clanged through neighborhoods, an Eastern market pulsed with life, families shopping, children laughing, the smell of fresh bread and smoked meats in the air. My father, Arnold, worked as a porter there. Big man, rough hands, a voice that could silence a room. He didn't smile much. My mama, Irene, passed when I was just 3 years old. They told me it was tuberculosis, though back then, poor folks like us weren't always given a proper diagnosis. My only real memory of her, the way she smelled like lavender, and a lullaby, soft, breathy, sung just for me. Some nights, even now, I swear I hear her singing it again, like a ghost slipping through the cracks in my memory. After she died, it was just me and my father in a tiny room in Corktown, just one bed, a rusted stove, and an old trunk where we stored our hand-me-down clothes. In the early days, he tried to be a good father. He'd take me to the market and sit me beside Mr. John's fruit stall, where I'd be given an orange when Dad wasn't looking. Poor baby people whispered, "No, Mama." And with a father like that, I didn't understand what they meant then. But as I got older, the meaning hit me harder than any slap could. You see, my father didn't just drink. He drowned himself in alcohol every single day, morning whiskey to warm the bones, a shot or two. At lunch for digestion, then straight into the bars on Michigan Avenue after work. If he was lucky, he made it home half sober. If we were lucky, he made it home without raising his belt. I was cooking by 6 years old, standing on a wobbly stool to stir boiling pots. On good nights, he'd eat and collapse on the bed. On bad nights, well, those were the ones I still dream about. He'd call me names, tell me I was useless, hit me until his own arms got tired. But I learned how to read him like a storm on the horizon, the twitch of his jaw, the way his hand rested on his belt buckle, the thick, sour smell of booze in the air. When I knew it was going to be one of those nights, I ran next door to Mrs. Marlene's. She was old, kind, and sharp-tongued. She'd let me hide under her bed until things calmed down. "Child," she used to say, handing me a crust of bread spread with lard, "you got to get out of here. You got to study. That's your ticket out." And Lord, did I study. Not out of passion, but because school was warm, lit, safe. I was the first kid to arrive every morning and the last to leave every afternoon. School meant food, working lights, and nobody yelling. The teachers started noticing. "She's got promise," they'd whisper. Mrs. Cecilia, my 4th grade teacher, once gave me a fresh notebook when mine had run out and been patched up with tape. That was the first real gift I ever received. For a moment, it felt like maybe, just maybe, life was turning a corner. Dad got a job as a security guard. It paid a little better. We moved to a slightly bigger room, this time with our own bathroom. That felt like a castle to me. And best of all, I finally had my own little bed. Around that time, when I was about 10, I found a stray cat near a dumpster, gray, skinny, and scrappy. I named him Whiskers. He became my first true friend. Dad hated animals, said they were just mouths to feed. But Whiskers knew how to hide when the footsteps on the stairs got heavy. On quiet days, I'd sit with him on my lap and whisper my dreams. To become a teacher like Miss Cecilia. Or a nurse. Maybe even have a home with clean curtains and a tiny garden. "One day, Whiskers," I'd say, "one day, we're getting out of here." I didn't know then how bad things were about to get. Winter of 1964 rolled in like a sledgehammer. My father lost his job. Rumor was he was drinking. On duty or stealing from the warehouse, maybe both. Rent went unpaid. Food disappeared from the cabinets. Whiskers did too, probably chasing something better. Then one night my father came home sober, but twitchy. eyes gleaming in a way that made my stomach twist. "Pack your things," he said, throwing a bag at me. "We're moving. We've been evicted before, sure." But this was different. "Where to?" I asked. "Got a good gig. I'm gonna manage a place. You'll have food, a room, you won't go hungry." Something about the way he said it made the hair on my neck stand up. But what could I do? I was 11, alone in the world and hungry. The next morning, we boarded a bus toward Detroit's industrial North End. The buildings got darker, the people more tired, the smell more chemical. We got off on a narrow street lined with old two-story homes. Most had boarded windows and sagging porches. Then he stopped in front of a large red house with a faded wooden sign, "Night Flower Inn." The iron gate squealed when he pushed it open. "This is it," he said, like he was showing me Disneyland. Something in my chest tightened. I wanted to run, but where? So I followed him inside, into a house that smelled like cigarette smoke, cheap perfume, and something rotten beneath it all. If I'd known what was waiting past that door, I might have run anyway, cold, hungry, and all alone. Inside, the light was dim. Dust floated in the air like ghosts. The wallpaper was red but stained, the kind of red that never comes off. Pictures of half-naked women lined the walls. Then came Carmen. Bleached blonde, heavy makeup, long red nails, and a robe she shouldn't have worn before 6 p.m. "Arnold," she purred. "And this must be the girl." She looked at me like I was a piece of meat she didn't order. "Skinny," she said. "She'll fatten up," my father replied, patting me like a prize dog. They took me upstairs. My room was a shoebox with 3 single beds. I was to share it with Sonia and Dora. They were sleeping when I arrived, one of them with purple bruises on her arm, the other curled up with her back to the wall. I asked quietly, "Where's the bathroom?" "At the end of the hall," Carmen snapped. "Use it quick. The girls need it later to get pretty." My father was already gone. Didn't say goodbye. Carmen pointed to a drawer and said, "Put your things there, then come help in the kitchen." And just like that, I was part of the house. Cleaning, cooking, washing sheets, scrubbing floors. I never went back to school. Dad said I didn't need it. For almost a year, I stayed just to help her. But even I knew it was only a matter of time before that changed. And I was right. It happened on my 12th birthday. I didn't even realize it was my birthday until Sonia whispered it that night. But that morning, my father and Carmen stood over me in the kitchen while I peeled potatoes. "It's time she starts earning what she eats," he said. "She's just a child," Carmen muttered. "Some folks prefer them that way," he snapped. And right then my world cracked open. That night, after a beauty bath, where Carmen scrubbed my skin raw and washed my hair with perfumed shampoo that stung my scalp, they dressed me in a thin white nightgown. "The Turk likes innocent looks," Carmen explained. Lipstick lips pursed. "Don't cry," smudges the makeup. I tried to shrink into myself, but they forced me out the door and down the hallway to meet the man they called the Turk. He wasn't Turkish. He was a fat, sweaty shoe factory owner in his 50s. He wore an expensive suit and smelled of cheap whiskey and regret. I closed my eyes, locked tight, and imagined a beach blue water, white sand, anything but the filthy parlor where I sat, trembling. The door clicked shut behind me, and the worst night of my life began. When it was over, he patted my head like I was a trained animal, tossed a few crumpled bills on the dresser and said, "Good girl, I'll be back." I crept back to the room I shared with Sonia and Dora, blood staining my gown, tears streaming down my face. Sonia was awake, smoking a cigarette in the dim morning light. "Come here," she whispered, making space on the bed. She cleaned me with a cloth and gave me a pill to dull the pain. "Tomorrow will be better," she said. But I knew better. I lay awake all night, listening to their muffled sobs and distant laughter from the salon below. Over the next months, my life became a cycle of hand-me-down violence and stolen kindness. Some nights, clients just wanted to boast with friends over drinks, so I sat quietly in a corner and listened. I saved fragments of their stories, snippets of politics, business deals, bribes whispered over bourbon. I clung to those details, not knowing why. On nights when the regulars came, Carmen assigned me to private parties, luxury hotel rooms, and secret gatherings. Dad collected the money. Carmen collected the girls. And I tried to collect every bit of information I could scribble on scraps of paper. Then came Congressman Myers. He was a pillar of American family values by day belts and microphones and stern speeches. By night, he was a predator. When he pointed at me like choosing meat at a butcher shop, I knew my life would never be the same. He hurt me in ways that burned below the skin. When I returned to the brothel, broken and bleeding, even Carmen looked Surprised. "What did he do to you?" she hissed. But when she saw Dad count the extra bills he'd made, she nodded. Business as usual. He came twice a week, sometimes more. He took me to his downtown apartment, to exclusive parties, to private dinners. So many faces, so many whispered promises. One day, I might marry you. That was the cruelest lie of all. I thought about ending it all, saved every pill I could steal, sleeping pills, painkillers, until I had enough to vanish. I hid them in a crack behind my bed. But just as I started planning, Jeremy appeared with a gift, a battered copy of The Little Prince. "A story to remind you," he said softly, "that what is essential is invisible to the eye." I read it in secret. I held that book like a lifeline. I saw myself in The Little Prince, exiled, alone, longing for kindness, and I began to believe, just a little, that I might deserve rescuing. The next week, I returned the book along with the pills. "I won't need these anymore," I told Jeremy. He hugged me like I was made of glass, gentle, protective. From that moment, we planned. He smuggled away coins from his delivery job. I secretly stashed my hidden tips in the lining of an old coat. I memorized names, dates, addresses, every hush-hush detail I could recall. We learned Dad was about to sell me outright to the congressman, transfer ownership, 24/7 access, a life in downtown apartments. Dad bragged to Carmen, not knowing I was eavesdropping, "It's my greatest deal yet." We didn't have the full plan or all the money. But Jeremy said, "Now or never." We got fake IDs through a friend, imperfect but usable. One cold night in 1970, I packed my coat, my memories, my hope, and slipped away from my bed. Jeremy was waiting in the alley, breath visible in the icy air. "Are you ready?" he whispered. I nodded, but fate had its own script. As I crept toward freedom, a commotion erupted inside the brothel. Scream after scream. I raced back to the stairs and saw Dad, drunken and angry, swinging a broken bottle. Congressman Myers yelled, drew a gun, and fired 3 shots. Dad crumpled. "On the floor," Carmen shouted. A lamp shattered, flames roared to life. From the stairwell, I saw Myers lift his gun, eyes locking onto mine. He began to climb the stairs. I darted into a side room, threw a chair through the window, and leapt onto the tin roof of the storage shed below. I twisted my ankle, but adrenaline carried me. I tumbled into the alley where Jeremy waited, face pale. "He's dead," I gasped. "Myers, he's coming." He scooped me up. We ran. Behind us, the Nightflower Inn became a blaze of orange and black smoke, swallowing the horrors inside. Sirens wailed, too late for those left behind. We reached a boarding house in Rivertown. Mrs. Judith, the landlady, took one look at me, blood, bruises, terror, and said, "You two look like you've seen the devil." She rented us a back room with no questions asked. For months, we lived on a hot plate and a thin mattress. Nights, I woke, screaming, reliving the fire, the gunshots, the faces of those who died. Jeremy held me until dawn. By day, I stared out the window like a caged bird. I couldn't work, no papers, no history. But the newspapers told the story. House fire in North End, 7 dead. Congressman's name was nowhere in the report. Power protects its own, I realized. Overwhelmed by anger, I crumpled the paper in my hand. "He'll never get away with this," I told Jeremy. "But the police work for him," he said softly. "What can we do?" I thought of the scraps of conversation I'd jotted down, the bribery deals, the missing activists, the hush money exchanges. I realized I was a witness, and if I had information, I could fight back. A week later, Jeremy found an article about a group called Mothers of Capitol Square Women protesting their disappeared children. I said, "That's my path." Under a scarf, I watched them gather in silence. I approached Mrs. Helen, an elegant woman holding a photograph of her missing daughter. "I have stories you need to hear," I whispered. She looked at me with eyes that understood. "Come," she replied. At her modest apartment, I shared everything, my years in that brothel, the congressman's crimes, the fire, the faces of the girls who never escaped. Far from pity, their eyes burned with righteous anger. Mrs. Helen connected me to Thomas, a Washington Post reporter investigating corruption. I gave him names, dates, dollar amounts. He photographed my scars, proof of my story. 2 weeks later, the exposé ran. My name was hidden, but the congressman's involvement was out. Embassies complained. Human rights groups rallied. They opened an investigation, not for sexual abuse, but for bribery and money laundering. Myers tried to flee with suitcase cash, airport guards Arrested him. I watched from Mrs. Helen's couch as headlines rolled in. She said, "You helped spark something big." I said, "I just wanted my life back." With the mother's help, I got new documents. I enrolled in night school at 17, oldest kid in class, hungriest to learn. Jeremy cheered me on. "We have a life now," he said. In 1975, I testified in court. My voice shook as I described every wound, every humiliation. The defense sneered, "Why believe a former prostitute?" I looked at Myers, cold in his suit, and said, "Because I have scars to prove every word." He was convicted, 15 years for corruption. Not enough, but a victory. As I stepped out of that courthouse, I breathed Detroit air like it was my first breath. I was 21, free, and ready for the next chapter. I stepped into the sunlight, shielded my eyes, and let the breeze carry away the last of that courtroom tension. At 21, I was no longer Grandma Annie, or rather, the girl who'd survived the Nightflower Inn. I was Annie Winters, survivor, witness, and soon-to-be advocate. Mrs. Helen, who had become the mother I lost at 3, was waiting with open arms. "What's next?" she asked, her voice steady. I took a deep breath. I want to study law, I said, or join the police. I want to protect girls like me. Helen's eyes glimmered. "Beth would be proud of you." That day marked the true end of my captivity and the thrilling beginning of my mission, rediscovering education. I returned to Mrs. Helen's apartment, carried my court papers inside, and set them on her kitchen table alongside my brand new birth certificate and social security card. They were miracles, proof that I could again claim citizenship in my own life. Night school was tough. I was the oldest student in my class, 21 among teenagers, but I had a fire inside. I devoured every textbook, math, history, English, basic civics. At the market where I worked mornings and afternoons, I studied during breaks, solved equations under the glow of a flickering fluorescent light. Jeremy, ever my constant, cheered me on. He worked extra shifts delivering beer, so I could afford a used typewriter. "Think of it," he'd say, "each page you type is a step away from that red house." By December 1976, I earned my high school diploma. They handed me that fragile, embossed certificate in a ceremony filled with proud families. Mine included Mr. Albert, the market owner who'd given me the day shifts and never asked about my past, and a handful of mothers of Capitol Square who now considered me family. Breaking into law enforcement one evening, as Jeremy and I shared leftover spaghetti, he pointed to the classifieds, Detroit Police Department hiring, women. "Welcome." I choked on a noodle. "Me? A cop?" He nodded, eyes gentle. "You know the system from the inside. You know what it lacks. You could change it." It was daunting. I remembered Detective Liel's words from my background interview. "One slip and you're out." But if I could stand in that courtroom and face congressmen and judges, I could face a training academy. I applied. My grades and test scores were exceptional, but that gap, my missing teens, almost disqualified me. I chose truth. I explained my history as vulnerable years and emphasized my determination. Detective Liel, who interviewed me, paused, then said, "You remind me of my sister who vanished. You've earned your spot. But no, eyes will follow you." I would not let their stares stop me. Academy trials. March 1977, I walked into the Detroit Police Academy as one of 8 women in a class of 60. In the morning, push-ups until my arms shook. Theory classes midday, criminal law, evidence protocols, investigative techniques. Evenings, study sessions under the dim dorm lights. The men, some with military or security backgrounds, doubted us. Jokes flew. "Girls, go make coffee, not arrests," they'd sneer. But I was ready. I channeled every ounce of pain and every stolen moment of hope into each obstacle. When I learned to fire a revolver, I remembered Myers's pistol aimed at me in that fiery hall and vowed never to let fear win. Jeremy visited whenever he could. He'd leave candies and pages of practice questions on my bunk. "For your sweet brain," he'd wink. In December 1978, we graduated. The ceremony hall buzzed. My badge felt heavy in my hand, an emblem of authority and protection. I ranked 3rd in my class. First assignment, Child Protection Unit. My first posting was at the Child and Adolescent Protection Unit, an underfunded corner of the department. Detective Barros, my supervisor, was one of few men who truly believed in shielding children from harm. He looked at me sympathetically the first day. "The ocean is big," he said. "For every kid we save, 10 more suffer. But if you save one life, it matters." My first operation came fast. A tip about a North Detroit massage parlor hiding underage girls. On surveillance, I watched girls as young as 13 slit through the door, faces hollow. My chest tightened, memories flooded back. I convinced Barros to let me lead. "Experience counts," I said. He nodded. Weeks of stakeouts, documentation footage, client logs. I saw their desperation. On raid night, we stormed in, rescuing 8 girls, the youngest barely 12. I knelt by each one and whispered, "I was you once, you're safe now." That raid shook me. It reopened wounds but affirmed my purpose. Jobs in uniform, authority, evidence, it all meant lives could change. Rising through the ranks in 1982, at 29, I became Detroit's first female inspector in our division. Promotion meant supervising investigations, mentoring younger officers, especially women. I pushed for stronger victim support and counseling services. By 1985, I helped establish the Women's Crimes Unit, a first-of-its-kind division focusing on sexual assault, domestic violence, and trafficking. We collaborated with social workers, medical professionals, legal advocates, a holistic approach I'd always dreamed of. Meanwhile, Jeremy and I built our family. In 1980, we adopted Clara, a 5-year-old rescued from a trafficking ring. Her parents had been killed by the very man who'd exploited them. Clara's bright smile and curious questions healed parts of my heart. 2 years later, in a twist I never expected, I became pregnant. Years of abuse had left my fertility in question, but there I was, expecting my son, Peter. Holding that tiny life in my arms felt like reclamation of everything stolen from me. Confronting Myers. Again I faced threats, bribes, campaigns to discredit my work, especially after arresting the councilman who'd been a client of the old brothel. I knew power fought back. Then, in 1994, Myers was released on parole after 8 years. I'd had enough. I refused to investigate rumors linking him to fresh abuses. Policy demanded neutrality, but my heart screamed, "Stop him." 3 years later, in 1997, I was called to a luxury hotel murder scene. Myers was the victim, 3 bullets in his chest. Many expected me to celebrate. Instead, I investigated with every ounce of professionalism I possessed. We discovered his killer was the brother of a girl who'd died in the 1970 brothel fire. A man who'd lived 2 decades plotting revenge. When he surrendered, he looked me in the eyes and said, "Thank me. I did what justice never could." I replied, "Justice isn't revenge, it's consequences and responsibility." Building a life of service in 2003. After 25 years of service, I retired as a captain. At my farewell ceremony, I saw faces that once doubted me, now brimmed with respect. Jeremy, now with gray at his temples, beamed. Clara, now a medical student, and Peter, studying law, sat front row. Mrs. Helen, 80 but unwavering, applauded like a proud mother. Scarred though my past remained, triggers in smells, sounds, touches. I had transformed pain into purpose. I founded the Annie Winters Foundation, supporting trafficking survivors with education grants, legal aid, counseling, and shelter. I traveled to Washington, D.C. with survivors, testified before Congress, helped pass tougher trafficking laws. At 72, I look back at the girl frightened under Mrs. Marlene's bed and see the woman who's fought for hundreds of girls. I've told you my story. Now it's your turn to tell me yours. Where are you watching from? Leave a comment. If this story moved you, hit like and subscribe. Every click shows survivors they're not alone. Every share spreads hope. From the ashes of that red house, I rose. And you can too. No matter how dark the door you face, there's always a path to freedom and a chance to turn your scars into strength. Warm hug from Grandma Annie. Remember, the darkest nights teach us to treasure the dawn. Retirement didn't mean stepping away. It meant stepping up in a new way. Just weeks after leaving the Detroit PD, I founded the Annie Winters Foundation, named for the girl who survived and the woman who vowed change. Our mission, to support survivors of sexual exploitation and human trafficking with education, legal aid, and safe housing. By 2004, we'd opened our first safe house in Corktown, the very neighborhood where my nightmare began. A small brick building, 2 stories, bright blue door, and a garden out back where survivors could plant their first seeds of hope. Inside, walls lined with books, legal guides, self-help manuals, feel-good novels. The scent of fresh coffee in the morning. Professional counselors on staff. And a kitchen table where every meal was shared family-style. Traveled to Washington, D.C. in 2005 with a group of survivors to testify before Congress. We pressed for tougher federal penalties against traffickers and stronger protections for minors. I spoke in a courtroom-turned-hearing room, flanked by young women who'd once been prisoners in places like the Nightflower Inn. When the gavel fell, I realized those walls no longer contained me. I was on the other side of power now. Over the next decade, the foundation expanded to 3 states. We partnered with local law enforcement to train officers in trauma-informed approaches, how to interview child survivors without re-traumatizing them, how to identify signs of trafficking in their patrols, and how to collaborate with social services. I found myself back in training rooms, not as a cadet, but as a teacher. Standing before uniformed officers, I would say, imagine you were my 11-year-old self. What would you need? Not pity, not platitudes, but protection, dignity, a path back to normalcy. Their faces would shift from skepticism to empathy as I shared pieces of my story. In 2012, the foundation launched scholarship programs for survivors to attend community college. I remembered Mrs. Chappell, Cecilia's taped-up notebook. It was a small gift that changed my life. What if we could multiply that effect? By 2015, over 50 survivors had earned degrees in nursing, social work, and criminal justice. Some became caseworkers in the very shelters that once sheltered them. Meanwhile, Jeremy and I watched our own children grow. Clara thrived in medical school, determined to heal the bodies and hearts of abuse survivors. Peter graduated from law school, focusing on human rights litigation. Together, at family dinners, we'd lean close and talk strategy, how to stem the tide of exploitation, one policy at a time. In 2018, we opened the Winter Harvest Center, a vocational training campus where survivors learn trades, culinary arts, carpentry, computer coding. The idea was simple: economic independence. I remembered how hunger pushed me into that red house. No one should face desperation without options. By age 70, I'd spoken at dozens of conferences worldwide from Toronto to Tokyo, always carrying a worn photograph of my 12-year-old self in a stained nightgown. I'd show it and say, "She's not that different from you. The only difference is opportunity." Applause would follow, proof that stories can bridge worlds. Through it all, I kept a journal. Tiny entries: helped Teresa find housing, gave testimony before UN committee, spoke at Detroit Women's Shelter Gala. These pages tracked the transformation from victim to advocate. I even wrote letters to my younger self. You are not broken, you are becoming. Lessons learned. If there's one thing I've learned over these 7 decades and 25 career years, it's that healing is not linear. It's a spiral forward and back, 2 steps up, 1 step down. Some days, I still wake from nightmares. But I've learned to breathe through them, to name the fear, to let it go. I've learned the power of one person's kindness, a neighbor's sandwich, a teacher's patched notebook, a friend's secret book. Those moments lit sparks that no monster could snuff out. I've learned that systems can be changed from within and without, but not by one person alone. You need communities, coalitions, families, strangers who decide, "I won't look away." I've learned that courage is contagious. When one girl stands up, she gives permission for another and another to stand. And I've learned that forgiveness is not forgetting, it's freeing yourself. For years, I believed mercy for my abusers was weakness. Now I realize that holding on to hate only chains you to the past. Letting go of rage opens the path forward. Your role in the story, you, watching this video, have power in your voice. Share this story. Talk about it with friends, family, local leaders. Support organizations that rescue and rehabilitate. Mentor a young person. Donate a notebook to a school in need. Maybe you're a teacher, a nurse, a journalist, a student. Imagine the change you can spark with your unique gifts: compassion, research, creativity, advocacy. And if you're a survivor, know this: you are not alone. Your past does not define your future. There is a community waiting to embrace, resources to heal, a world in need of your voice. Looking ahead, the Annie Winters Foundation is launching a digital mentorship. platform in 2025 pairing survivors with professional mentors in law, healthcare, business, and the arts. Our goal is to break isolation and build networks that last a lifetime. We're also expanding our safe houses across Midwest cities, Fargo, Minneapolis, Indianapolis, to ensure that any child fleeing exploitation can find immediate refuge. And later this year, I'll be speaking at the Global Summit on Human Trafficking in Geneva. It's humbling to represent voices once silenced. But none of this happens without you, viewers, supporters, advocates, storytellers. Every like, every share, every donation, every whispered word of support sends a message. Survivors matter, justice matters, hope matters. So if you feel moved, please consider subscribing to Grandma Annie's Tales. In future episodes, I'll share more survivor stories, practical tips for spotting and preventing exploitation, and interviews with experts on legal and mental health support. Drop a comment. What would you like to see next? A deep dive into our mentorship program, interviews with Foundation alumni, a live Q&A on navigating resources? Let me know. I began this video with that night behind the red door when I was just a terrified child. Now, at 72, I sit before you, whole, determined, armed with decades of experience and a heart still set on change. Thank you for being part of this journey. Thank you for caring. And thank you for believing that even the smallest actions can light the darkest paths. Until next time, hold tight to your hopes, extend hands to those in need, and remember, the dawn is worth every long, cold night. Welcome back, dear friends. If you stuck with me this far, thank you from the bottom of my heart. In this part, I'd like to share a few stories of survivors who've walked the path from darkness into light, and how small acts of kindness made all the difference. These tales come from our Foundation archives and remind us that hope can arise anywhere. Maria's journey, from shadows to scholarship. When I first met Maria in 2006, she was barely 16, a quiet girl with haunted eyes and hands that trembled when she wrote her name. She'd been trafficked across state lines, forced into a ring that moved her from city to city. Our outreach team rescued her in a raid that felt eerily like déjà vu, the same fear I'd known as a child. Maria clung to me afterward, whispering, "Will anyone ever care about me?" I knelt beside her bed in our Corktown safe house and said, "I care. And you're not just another case file, you're a person with dreams." Once she felt safe, we enrolled Maria in our scholarship program. She chose computer science, inspired by stories of women programmers creating secure apps for survivors. Every quarter, she'd write me letters, ink smudged by tears, thanking me for believing in her. In 2012, Maria graduated with honors and accepted a job at a tech nonprofit focused on cybersecurity for nonprofits. Today, she leads a team developing apps that connect survivors to resources instantly. Her story shows how education can transform a life. A patch notebook led me to law enforcement. A scholarship led Maria to empower others with technology. Kevin's compassion, a doctor's promise. Not all our stories are about survivors themselves. Some come from allies who stood up, like Dr. Kevin Marshall, a young ER physician I met in 2009. He treated a teenage girl with unexplained injuries, bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. His gut told him this wasn't an accident. He quietly contacted our foundation instead of filing a routine report. Together, we orchestrated a rescue operation, getting her to a safe house before her trafficker realized what happened. That single call to us changed her life and many others. Kevin went on to establish a training module for medical students on identifying and reporting trafficking cases. Over 1,500 students have completed it. He often says, medicine isn't just about healing bodies, it's about saving souls. His story reminds us that anyone, in any profession, can become a lifeline. The power of community, Detroit's vigil. In 2014, Detroit faced a surge in trafficking cases tied to an on-answer underground network operating through online ads. Fear gripped neighborhoods, and parents worried for their teens. Mothers of Capitol Square rallied again, silent vigils at Hart Plaza every Thursday evening. Hundreds of people showed up, holding candles and photos of missing loved ones. The city's mayor took notice. He invited me and other advocates to a roundtable, and within months, Detroit PD launched a specialized cyber investigation unit. They tracked ads, infiltrated networks, and arrested key traffickers. Now, every year on the anniversary of that first vigil, Detroit commemorates National Human Trafficking Awareness Day with candlelight services and educational fairs, transforming grief into action. Lessons from these stories. Education empowers. Whether through scholarships or training modules, knowledge equips survivors and allies to break cycles. Compassion saves. Single act, like Dr. Marshall's call, can be the spark that leads to rescue. Community matters. When neighbors unite, their collective voice forces institutions to act. How you can help fund scholarships. Even small donations sponsor a semester's tuition for a survivor. Partner with professionals if you're in healthcare, law, tech, or education. Consider hosting training sessions. Attend or host vigil. Organize local awareness events. Visibility drives change. Share these stories, post this video, talk about trafficking, and placard your social feeds with hotlines. In our next segment, I'll dive into practical tips for spotting trafficking, what signs to look for in your communities, workplaces, and online. Remember, vigilance can make all the difference. Thank you for listening. If you're ready for part 6, signs to spot, signals to support, just let me know. Grandmother Annie is here, always ready to guide you through the dark. Welcome back, friends. In this section, we'll cover practical tips for recognizing human trafficking both in person and online, and how you can respond safely and effectively. Awareness is step 1, action is step 2. 1. Spotting in-person indicators. A. Vulnerable behavior isolation. Victims are often kept apart from others, rarely left alone, or accompanied by an overly controlling companion. Fearful demeanor. Look for someone who avoids eye contact, speaks in hushed tones, or seems hesitant to answer simple questions. Lack of autonomy. Watch if someone doesn't have personal identification, money, or the freedom to move about unaccompanied. B. Physical and environmental clues. Poor living conditions. If you're a landlord, utility worker, or delivery driver, note overcrowded, unsanitary, or locked living spaces. Signs of physical abuse. Unexplained bruises, scars, or signs of malnourishment. Restricted belongings, few personal items, limited clothing options, or uniforms indicating forced labor. 2. Online red flags. A. Suspicious advertisements. Platforms like classified sites or social media may host ads for escorts, models, or entertainers. Be wary when photos look overly professional and contact information is minimal. B. Inconsistent personal details. Online profiles with contradictory details, age, location, name, can signal that someone is using forced photos and false backstories. C. High turnover of contacts. If you notice numerous accounts posting the same ads or rotating phone numbers regularly, this can indicate trafficking operations. 3. Workplace warning signs. A. Hospitality and transportation hotel staff, unpaid workers cleaning rooms, employees living on-site in poor conditions, truck drivers or delivery personnel. Colleagues never leave the vehicle unaccompanied or take all breaks with the same supervisor. B. Agriculture and factories workers who can't speak for themselves, have someone else translate everything, or are fearful of law enforcement contact. 4. How to respond. A. Personal safety. First, never confront a suspected trafficker directly. Prioritize your safety. B. Discreet documentation. Note license plates, descriptions, locations, times, and any conversation snippets. Keep this information confidential. C. Contact authorities and hotlines. National Human Trafficking Hotline. U.S. 1-888-373-78888. Text HELP to 233733, BEFREE. Many countries have similar hotlines. Save local numbers. D. Engaging organizations reach out to reputable NGOs such as Polaris Project, Coalition to Abolish Slavery and Trafficking, CAST, or your local Survivor Support Foundation. 5. Community-level actions. A. Training and workshops. Schools, places of worship, and businesses can host awareness sessions, invite experts to educate staff and volunteers. B. Policy advocacy. Support legislation, mandating training for frontline professionals, healthcare, hospitality, transportation. 2. U. Recognize and report trafficking. C. Creating safe spaces. Encourage businesses, cafes, salons, pharmacies to display hotline information and posters, signaling that they're safe points for victims to ask for help. 6. Self-care for advocates. Supporting survivors and confronting trafficking can take an emotional toll. Remember to debrief with a mentor or counselor after stressful incidents. Maintain boundaries. You can't save everyone. Focus on realistic actions. Practice wellness, exercise, meditation, hobbies that rejuvenate you. You can be the eyes and ears your community needs. By staying vigilant and prepared, you turn awareness into life-saving action. Welcome back. You've learned how to spot the signs, how to respond safely, and the importance of self-care for advocates. Now, let's zoom out and look at how policy, partnerships, and global efforts multiply individual actions into widespread change. 1. Policy change, laying the legal foundation. Strengthening legislation, mandatory reporting laws, states that require certain professionals, healthcare workers, teachers, hotel staff to report suspected trafficking. These laws ensure that frontline workers aren't merely observers but active participants in rescue efforts. Enhanced penalties, increasing criminal sentences for traffickers and those who solicit minors, sends a clear societal message: exploitation will not be tolerated. Victim protection statutes, laws that guarantee survivors access to social services, healthcare, housing, legal aid without fear of deportation or criminalization for actions taken under duress. Funding and resource allocation. Dedicated grants, federal and state budgets that earmark funds specifically for anti-trafficking units, victim shelters, and survivor support. Programs. Research investments, funding academic and field research to identify trafficking trends, measure program effectiveness, and develop data-driven interventions. 2. Cross-sector partnerships, uniting for a common cause. Law enforcement and social services task forces, joint operations that pool federal, state, and local police resources with social workers and victim advocates. Regular debriefs ensure trauma-informed approaches guide every rescue. Co-located offices. Some cities house police detectives and social service agencies under one roof. This proximity expedites referrals, strengthens trust, and streamlines care for survivors. Private sector engagement. Hospitality alliances. Major hotel chains partner with NGOs to train staff, distribute wallet cards with hotline info and code words guests can use to signal distress. Technology companies, social media platforms, and classified ad sites implement AI-driven filters to detect suspicious trafficking ads. Payment processors flag transactions linked to known traffickers. Financial institutions, banks collaborate with law enforcement to spot money laundering patterns typical of trafficking rings, then freeze accounts and alert authorities. 3. Community coalitions, grassroots power. Multi-faith initiatives. Houses of worship, churches, mosques, synagogues form interfaith coalitions, hosting awareness workshops and mobilizing volunteers for outreach programs. Educational networks. Universities develop dual degree programs combining social work and criminal justice, preparing graduates to tackle trafficking from multiple angles. Campus chapters of anti-trafficking clubs engage students in peer-to-peer education, fundraising, and legislative advocacy. Survivor-led organizations, the most powerful. Coalitions center survivor voices. Councils of survivors advise policy committees, speak at conferences, and mentor those newly freed. Their first-hand insights ensure programs address real needs, not just theoretical concerns. 4. Global initiatives beyond borders. International agreements. The Palermo Protocol, UN, Protocol to Prevent, Suppress, and Punish Trafficking in Persons, establishes a unified global definition of trafficking, requiring signatories to criminalize it and protect victims. Council of Europe Convention extends protections across European nations, emphasizing victim-centered support and transnational cooperation. Cross-border task forces, regional coalitions, like the ASEAN Intergovernmental Commission Against Trafficking, coordinate raids on trafficking hubs spanning multiple countries. Shared databases track traffickers' movements and financial trails. Global survivor networks. Online platforms connect survivors. Worldwide forums, moderated by mental health professionals, live-streamed panels at international summits, and digital mentorship programs. Shared stories foster solidarity and collective healing. 5. Measuring impact, data, and accountability. Tracking outcomes. Key metrics: number of arrests, prosecutions, convictions, survivors served, training sessions delivered, hotline call volumes. Longitudinal studies. Researchers follow survivors over years to assess program effectiveness, housing stability, employment rates. Mental health outcomes. B. Transparency portals. Agencies and NGOs publish annual reports, online budgets, activity summaries, success stories, and lessons learned. Public access promotes accountability and encourages donor confidence. 6. Scaling success, replicable models. A. Model shelter blueprint. The Annie Winters Safe House model, physical layout, staffing ratios, program schedules, has been packaged into a toolkit freely available to communities worldwide. B. Training curricula. Our trauma-informed investigative training has been adapted by police academies in 5 states. It includes survivor testimonials, role-playing scenarios, and specialized interview techniques. C. Digital platforms. The mentorship app soft launch. A joint project with a tech nonprofit matches survivors with volunteer mentors. The open source code is downloadable, allowing other nonprofits to deploy localized versions. 7. Your role in the movement. A. Advocate locally, think globally. Write to local representatives supporting anti-trafficking bills. Volunteer your professional expertise. Teach digital skills, provide legal workshops, or host community forums. B. Support ethical businesses. Patronize companies certified as trafficking-free, those that vet labor in their supply chains and support survivor reintegration programs. C. Keep informed and inform others. Follow reputable news outlets and NGOs on social media. Share posts, articles, and videos to spread accurate information. 8. Sustaining momentum. Fighting trafficking is a marathon, not a sprint. Burnout is real. To sustain this work, rotate leadership, ensure survivor leaders have decision-making power and rest cycles. Diversify funding, blend grants, private donations, and earned income, e.g. social enterprises, to reduce ebbs and flows. Invest in innovation. Pilot new technologies, blockchain for secure victim records, VR empathy training, then scale what works. As you can see, transforming awareness into a global movement requires strategy, collaboration, and unwavering commitment. From that little girl peering out the red-painted windows of the Nightflower Inn to a worldwide coalition of advocates, every step forward has built on the last. In our final segment, Part 8, I'll share how each of you can find your specific place in this movement, whether as a professional, volunteer, survivor, or supporter, and show you some practical next steps. Let's keep the momentum going. You've heard my story, from a terrified child behind the red door to a global advocate. You've learned signs, actions, policies, and partnerships. Now, let's talk about you, where you fit in, and how you can make an immediate difference. You're an individual advocate. A. Educate yourself and others. Deepen your knowledge. Read survivor memoirs, scholarly reports, e.g. Polaris Project's annual data, and credible news coverage. Host knowledge shares. Organize book clubs, movie nights, or discussion panels in your community center or online. B. Community engagement volunteer. Offer time at shelters, hotlines, or mentorship programs. Even a few hours a month can be transformative. Awareness campaigns. Use your social media platforms to post facts, hotline numbers, and survivor stories with consent. C. Personal preparedness. Save and share hotlines 12888 373 7888 US and equivalent numbers in your country. Know local resources, identify local NGOs, legal aid offices, and shelters. Bookmark their contacts. 2. If you're a professional. A. Healthcare workers implement screening protocols. Incorporate routine questions about safety, freedom of movement, and signs of control in patient intake forms. Create safe spaces. Display hotline information discreetly in waiting areas and exam rooms. B. Educators' curriculum. Integration. Teach students age-appropriate content on consent, labor rights, and exploitation risks. Reporting mechanisms. Ensure staff and students know how to report concerns confidentially. C. Law enforcement and legal professionals. Trauma. Informed practice. Attend specialized training on interviewing survivors without re-traumatization. Support restorative justice. Advocate for programs that emphasize survivor healing alongside prosecution. D. Business and technology. Ethical supply chains. Audit labor practices in your suppliers and partners. Digital safety tools. Collaborate with NGOs to develop apps or platforms that alert authorities when suspicious patterns arise. 3. If you're a survivor or survivor, ally a peer, support. Share your story safely, whether in support groups, blogs, or podcasts. Your voice can guide others toward help. Mentor new survivors, offer listening ears and practical guidance, how to secure housing, access education, or navigate legal systems. B. Advocacy and leadership. Join boards and committees. Many organizations seek survivor leaders to shape policies and programs. Public speaking. Partner with local events, schools, or faith groups to offer your perspective and expertise. 4. If you're a policymaker or community leader. A. Legislate. Proactively enact survivor-centered laws, guarantee healthcare, education, and legal aid for survivors without punitive measures. Fund prevention education. Allocate budget for school-based programs that teach students about labor rights and exploitation risks. B. Leverage municipal resources task. Force creation. Form multi-agency teams. Police, social services, health departments to coordinate responses. Public-private partnerships. Incentivize businesses to join anti-trafficking coalitions through tax credits or public recognition. 5. Immediate next steps for everyone. Learn one new resource. Visit nationalhotline.org, US, or your country's equivalent and bookmark their tools. Share one story, post a survivor's journey, or a fact sheet on your social media. Use hashtags like #EndTrafficking and #MeSurvivorVoices. Support one organization, donate time, money, or in-kind items, books, school supplies, clothing to a local safe house. Host or attend one event. Look for local awareness walks, virtual webinars, or church gatherings focused on human trafficking. 6. A final word of encouragement. Change begins with a single step, be it a conversation, a donation, or a moment of listening without judgment. The path to ending exploitation and uplifting survivors is long, but every stride matters. You are not alone in this journey. From the courageous girls rescued by our first raid to the hundreds of professionals and volunteers who've joined the cause, you stand on the shoulders of giants, and now it's your turn to reach back and lift someone else. Thank you for watching Grandma Annie's Tales. If this series has empowered you, please like this video to show solidarity. Subscribe for more survivor stories, expert interviews, and actionable insights. Comment below. How will you take your next step? Remember, from the darkest nights to the brightest dawns, our shared compassion lights the way. A gentle hug and a world of gratitude from Grandma Annie until our next journey together.